going to talk about the second precept, which is just for today, do not anger. And we've been discussing it in different formats, anger. In the first week we talked about how anger was a reaction to something. Like anger is a mask sometimes. It is a secondary form, it's a byproduct of that feeling of injustice, that feeling of unfairness. And whether it's rational or not, right? Whether it's good or not, anger is anger depending on the person that's having the reaction. So the first week we played around with that, and I wanted you to notice what was under your anger, what really you were angry about. You know, whether it was diminishing, a slight by someone. And then we went into the second week we went into a more seething anger. A more, the seething anger that doesn't show it's angry. You know it, but you run on that for a long period of time. That's usually in family drama. Seething anger. It's usually when people get into their late 40s, 50s and 60s and life hasn't kind of went the way they anticipated or wanted or thought. So there's a seething anger of what they didn't know, etc. And then last week we looked at another kind of anger, but this week I wanted to look at, you can remind me what last week's was, if you remember. But this week I wanted to talk about the anger that is bitterness. Yeah. And the thing is, if you don't inquire, you can't shift what you don't know. And sometimes, we talked about jealousy and envy. But the other part of jealousy and envy is this, we talked about hatred last week, that's what it was. Hatred. Which we see a lot, you know, in division, and hatred at a group, hatred at a culture, hatred at a religious denomination. But this week I wanted to look at bitterness. And the problem is no one's going to admit it. Oh, we have to have a sense of humor when we talk about these really big subjects. Because bitterness is venom. And when you're dealing with bitterness, just like in Ayurvedic cooking, you cut that bitterness with some sweet. It's the exact same as cooking. And that bitterness can be Machiavellian, can try and block you, can try and waste your time, derail you, bitter that you're getting ahead, bitter that you're getting on. So that bitterness is again jealousy and envy, but it's another level of jealousy and envy. That bitterness is stoked. It's old. It's as old as we are. And that's why we used to have the divine right of kings, and we had people that led that were warrior kings and queens, and then there were the wise rulers that understood that if their kingdom was flourishing, that if those around them didn't know how to use the tools they were using for agriculture, or they had found different ways of doing things, if they didn't share that knowledge, it created a bitterness around them, a jealousy and envy, but that bitterness that turned into venom, that turned into battles, that turned into sieges, that turned into tyrants. So how does that look in today's world, you know? And that's the thing, no one really knows that they're bitter unless they have a spiritual practice and they start to do their emotional inventory and inquire. And the thing is, people don't want to tolerate that bitterness anymore. They know when someone is, you can sense it, it's an energetic feeling. It doesn't matter anymore how much people act or pretend. People don't want to be around it. They don't enjoy it. And it used to be, I think, before the global pandemic, people used to put up with it, especially in family. People who were bitter in family. Whatever, you know, pick your thing. That life didn't go their way. That their sisters aren't talking to them anymore because they're just tired of the bitterness. The judgment. Never been happy for people. And it's tough when it's family. Yeah, you can dodge people in your life that, you know, might be a co-worker, might be, but, you know, but I'm sure you've even come across it, you know, if you've worked for people, that when you start to shine, or you start to get promotion, or you start to do something, or you're even going to leave to start your own business, you see that, sometimes that bitterness. Oh, nice, right? So, and it doesn't really matter how sweet you are, you sometimes don't change them because they don't know. They just don't know. And some people call it negativity, right? How you have to dodge negativity and only have, you come over here, Mr. Boo. You can only have positive vibes only, right? That thing. Let's only have positive vibe people around me. Well, you know what? Sometimes your positive vibe people are putting on a face as well. You know, if people are embittered or bitter that you don't, you know, that you're doing your thing and you're no longer working for the company, you've went off, and it's their process, not yours. And sometimes the behavior is not the person, right? Sometimes your friend is kind of down and embittered that you've left. And they then transition in being happy for you or inspired by you. Yes, thank you for reminding me, Leah. I have it written down, toxic positivity. So, here's the thing about toxic positivity. And I'm going to lay it out for you really clearly because it's came up the last 48 hours in a few different directions. Toxic positivity is only used when you're using spiritual teachings in a secular setting. Let me repeat that again. Toxic positivity only comes up when you're using spiritual teachings of just for today, do not anger, in a secular setting, mean there is no spiritual consciousness. I am using just for today, do not anger in a spiritual setting. Because we know that that anger within us is just going to inflame more anger from the other person. That we can transmute that anger into action. We can get busy with it. But when they talk about toxic positivity, they're using toxic positivity to pretend that your friends aren't bitter about you and still sticking around them, and pretending that they're not bitter. That's lying to yourself. That is, and why would you be around an energy that is not your, you wouldn't even be in that vibration. They would be removed from your energy field. So the other toxic positivity is when people use affirmations, right? Those affirmations that are pretending that you are, anybody that has worked with me with cancer, or worked with me with leukemia, or worked with me with, you cannot focus on the disease. The disease is going well. You have to focus on the healing and the wellness. So you have to activate those parts of yourself that are well and are working well. So that's what you're focusing on in a spiritual setting. You're not trying to trick yourself. You're not trying to use toxic positive affirmations. Affirmative affirmations are activating the healer within. So toxic positivity is undoing people in the secular setting, taking spiritual teachings that are not rooted in a spiritual understanding and knowing and owning, right? We don't trick ourselves. We say, oh yeah, I'm bitter, I'm angry. What is underneath that anger? I need to tap on that anger. I need to send energy to that anger. I need to meditate on that anger. I need to go to party with that anger. I need to take it to a circle, that anger. We go into action. We're not saying, I am feeling great and pretending I'm not angry. That's a non-secular thing. That's not what this community is about. So I'm so glad you brought it up. I had it written down, Leah, because I think we need to get really clear, because what's happening is a lot of spiritual teachings have been co-opted by therapy and medicine, and I think that's amazing. I think it's great, because what they were doing 20 years ago when I was doing this, 40 years ago, they were doing practices that were harmful with SSRIs and other things that electric shock treatment, etc. But when you use these practices, spiritual practices, in a secular way, i.e. meaning there is no spiritual consciousness, or if you believe in the universe or God, that's gone. There is no tuning, there is no alignment, there is nothing. There is only the practice. Stripped. Someone had asked me this week, a yogi who has done her PhD, she said, I sometimes wonder what we lose when we take meditation into the secular and we take the connection to samadhi, to bliss, to the divine out of meditation. What is being lost? So when people talk about toxic positivity, They might be talking about it in a secular way. If there's a spiritual practice, a real spiritual practice, you're not kidding yourself on that you're not angry and you're not bitter. You're coming to me and saying, Patty, I just realised that I'm really bitter. And I need to collapse it and I need to get rid of it. And this is where it's from. It's from this time when I was 15. It's from this time when I was 24. We don't gaslight ourselves in a spiritual practice. We have the spiritual practice to admit where the work is at. And usually that admittance is gnarly. That admittance does not bypass or skim over the top of what your work is. Because that's why, a spiritual practice is difficult. It's tricky. It's unpacking. And once you've unpacked one Russian doll, you're unpacking another Russian doll. Another one. But then there's something that happens when you start getting into a real spiritual practice. You start to enjoy it. You start to really enjoy energetically what you're really doing. And then you start to become aligned with spiritual consciousness. Your connection to spiritual consciousness, not mine. Your own unique knowing of that thing that you've known since you were a child. That some of you lost, some of you dropped, some of you had it beaten out of you. Usually, some of you I know found in nature, found on the farm, found through a spiritual practice of a grandparent. And what we're having to do is kind of go back to what we knew, our own connection. It's already there. I'm just reminding you of it. So just for today, when you see that bitterness, and you see that venom, that's theirs. That must be really hard to live like that, in that mind field, in that, in just that poison. But sometimes it's the only poison that they know. Like they've drank their own Kool-Aid. And we can't pretend it's not there, because it's there in humanity. But what we have to do is not be scared of it. Not be like, oh, positive vibes only. If I did that, I wouldn't be seeing half of you. Right? Because you always bring your negative vibes to me, because I'm the safe place to tell me how you really feel, what's really going on. You're not trying to put up a facade. You're like, listen, this is what it is. I need to get rid of it because it's stopping me create X, Y, and Z. You know. That's the beauty of what I feel we've created over 20 years. Is the space that we can be in our truth. In a fun way. In an enjoyable way. Enjoy, not enjoy. Enjoys something else. Enjoys, you threw a party because you were like bitter, because you had to pretend that you were, here's your toxic positivity. You had to pretend that you were happy, but you aren't really. Enjoy is something else. Enjoy is a interaction with something that cannot be manipulated, cannot be bartered with. It is an encounter. Joy is an encounter. You can fake happiness. You can really, really do a good job on happiness, climbing up your plastic mountains. But joy is that moment where the divine or spiritual consciousness is telling you, Kina, whether that's a hummingbird looking straight at you, right? So let's not get in our head. I think there's too much talking a lot of the time on what we think we know. And a spiritual practice isn't about how many books you've read. It's about really interacting with spiritual consciousness, and it's really about having a practice. Everything else is homework. So this has been great. Next month I'm going to have a break because I'm going to be working on the new website and some goodies for you. And then in April we'll do the first precept, just for today, do not worry. So I want to take a break and do this over a year so we cover all 5 of them. And I like to take my time. Because that's the thing, when we start to try and rush our spiritual practice, we start to cut corners and we start to choose teachers that... And I'm speaking from experience here. People have looked at what I ask you to do and they're like, oh, well, let me go to this other person that's going to be easier down in Venice. And then they do that and they come back 2 years later that person was, I don't know, a predator, or they were, they didn't feel attuned at all. I've had people that have told me they've been attuned and I'm like, okay, well, do some Reiki on me, do some energy work on me, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, but I'm not feeling anything. So maybe we'll do a talk on that about, because it is definitely a conversation that I think is worthwhile having, in how you choose who the right person is for you. Because there is that balance, right, of sometimes choosing the easy. And then sometimes avoiding what you know and who you know you need to work with, but you're in avoidance of the work and them because you know that they'll know. And then there's trusting who is the right person that's really in alignment and who is the right person that is safe, and what those dog whistles are. Because I think that's an important thing to understand, because that's a subtle energy, that there are dog whistles and there's clear dog whistles, so we can discuss them. We'll maybe do that once next month, and I'll post that. Things that I've found helpful over the years, and maybe some of my students can come on and talk about experience they've had and what they've seen. And so it's kind of like real life instances, and I'm sure you guys have all got stories, and I think it's good to kind of talk about it from a neutral, because some of us have had people and what we've done and what we've said and how we've maneuvered it, how we have taught other people from that. So I think it's a conversation that would be a good one to have. But the bitterness and the venom, you don't need to put up with it. Now that used to be a lot in the office and at work, people being bitter and doing things. But now with, it's still there obviously, but it's much more masked. But you have more recourse now for that. But yeah, it's all coming from the jealousy, envy, hatred, and it all goes down a spiral into bitter root. So that sweetness is what cuts it. So if someone is being bitter towards you or embittered, that you're doing well or whatever, just be like, they're right, I am doing well. And But that isn't inside of you, it's inside of them. And that's tough to wake up with every single day. And it is void of joy, which is something that people are realizing. They're realizing that, why am I so miserable? But some people are joy averse. But you have to realize you're joy averse before you, and that's a lot of traumatic things and hypervigilance and other things coming in. But it was good seeing you. I need to go. Love you. Enjoyed talking to you. I'll post it tomorrow. All right? Take care. Bye.